Like we're afraid of what's
Oh,
next. And
we are live. So Cynthia speaks Spanish, so that's fun. We'll dive into that too, because this is good. Fear can be, and it is something that there's a healthy side to it, right? There's a negative side to fear, of course. Fear can keep us in our house, protected
yeah,
from from the entire world, and we worried about sharks swimming in our lawn, right? There's impractical, then there's the real ones, and I think a lot of the listeners, a lot of the visionaries who come on this program, they have a pretty strong handle on a lot of fears that other people don't. And
that's
now
true.
they've moved to higher levels. And I think that's where we go when we talk about humanity itself, our humanity. Does it impede our leadership or does it not? And I
Hmm.
think if we debate that higher level, the the more advanced visionaries and leaders from a self-awareness standpoint will be able to benefit far more, because you do have a gift of knowledge that leads you to be cerebral.
Hmm.
And I think there's certain discoveries we can't make about ourselves without that level of knowledge. And that's one
Right.
of the reasons why I'm really happy to have you on the show. So those who don't know, Steve Rice is one of the leaders at the Globally Conscious Leader. And we talked about this deep subject called um, zero. Oh man, I got it right before we talked. Zero. Help me out,
Unmeasured,
Steve.
zero
Unmeasurable
unmeasured externalities.
externalities, right?
Yeah.
And I had a really hard time with that, just understanding that concept. But as I began to understand what that was all about, I began to see the genius behind it too. And I was like, okay, we've got so much to talk about. At the end of the day, I found a man who sincerely cared about people. I found a leader who cared about his relationship with his children, a man who very much appreciates music and the guitar. And we geeked out on a song that he had his son write, and gave me an inspiration of something I can do with my children as they continue to expand their own opportunities as musicians.
Well,
So it was
pleased I
we had
could
a,
inspire you.
oh, dude, it was huge, man. I can't thank you enough for that, because we do that in terms of art and drawing at this stage. But as they begin to become more comfortable with the instruments that they collectively play,
Yeah.
my three kiddos are already starting. My three oldest, my youngest one's not at that stage yet. But it will. It's just so much fun, to play with your kids, and
Yeah.
to play by inventing things. So, do you mind just sharing that a little bit? I would love to. Are you okay with sharing about the song your son and you
Yeah.
collaborated on?
Yeah. I mean, to start off, I could say like the biggest inspiration I had for my children is I wanted them not to be afraid of musical instruments, kind of the way I was. I was made to play piano, made to go to lessons, and I loved music. But I learned a lot at those lessons. But coming home, I didn't have access to what I wanted to do, which was play guitar and stuff. So I hung my instruments on the wall when my kids were very little, and I made a rule, a couple rules that weren't really rules; they were just guidelines for the kids.
Hmm.
There were rules for something. You know, if you take something off the wall, you have to play a song. You can't just bang on it. And when you're done, hang it back up. Those are the only rules. So I now have three children who are all expert musicians, and we have a band. We've recorded like over 500 songs, and maybe 20 or 40 of those are originals. And part of what Jackson's talking about is we have an album of live songs that's on Spotify, plus 4 or 5 others that are cover albums, and we have a YouTube channel. And so yeah, we write songs together, and I actually have another band that we played Friday night at a Halloween party, and we played one of the songs that my son and I wrote. So
Oh,
it was a big hit. So yeah, it brings me a lot of joy playing music and singing and yeah, art.
that is so cool, man. And this song, context for you visionaries out there. I mean, this is why, again, it's so you can do this in your work. You can do this in so many areas. But if I remember the story correctly, Steve's son came in and they were talking about music, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you create a song with the words God power lines, or Jesus power lines, and journey or car, or something like the highway." And then within hours, pretty much, they had this song and video AI thing produced. I mean, that takes a lot of intentionality. to be able to produce something like that. And for those of you who may be newer to the idea of intentionality, to me, it's one of the most liberating feelings of life, right?
Mhm.
And one that if we maximize, our days can be highly enjoyable in ways that I just didn't experience before becoming very intentional with my time.
Yeah.
Further thoughts on that?
Well, I would agree, and I would use the word opportunity.
Yeah.
It kind of ties into how I try to be in the world and what I teach leaders, whether they're a janitor or a CEO or an owner of a company, um, which is MOCA: motivation, opportunity, clarity, and ability. And yeah, the intentionality is about recognizing what you're good at, which is an ability, having clarity that you want to do it or you know what to do, and giving yourself the opportunity to do it. So yeah, I agree 100%. Like that intentionality, the desire to figure out what you want to do and do it is really important. And it's
A
baby
lot of you
steps. You know?
listeners, y'all want more mocha in your life, so this works out. This works out
Yeah.
nicely. There's two versions you can have. So let's dive into resources a little bit. So, Steve, if what are three resources that you're grateful you came across and implemented on your journey to become a visionary leader? It could be books, courses, etc.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question. Um, I think the one that I'm sort of standing on top of, like what do they say? Like standing on the shoulders of
Yeah, shoulders
giants.
of giants.
Um, one of those is a book called Humane Leadership by a gentleman named Stephen Sloan, who happens to be a good friend of mine. And he's the one who introduced me to MOCA. Um, there's most people in business probably know OMA, which is opportunity, motivation, and ability. That came out of some HR psychological studies in the 70s and became the OMA framework in the 90s. And another acronym which stands for High Performance Workplace, HPWP. So if you had an HPWP, you were probably using the OMA framework for communication, right? And it very much was sort of an HR tool trying to answer that question: how do we get the most out of our employees? It wasn't particularly a humane kind of thing. It was leadership, but it was performance and value and metrics, which are all important. And the Stephen added the clarity piece because he was running some major companies and he was realizing he was trying to have or was having OMA conversations with people. And what was lacking in terms of accountability was a clarity in each of those conversations. So, and he was looking to, as a manager, not just not take their accountability away from them by demanding they do certain things, but provide an opportunity for people to actually take that accountability themselves, whether they understood that that was what was happening or not, right? And part of that is his natural belief in the goodness of people, which I agree with. So
Yeah.
so that's where MOCA came from, and he used it as an accountability. Um, what did he call it? Accountability jig, accountability framework. I use it for everything. And I also point out that we're all using it all the time. We just don't think about it.
Mhm.
And to tie in zero unmeasured externalities, I would actually say we're using that all the time too. We just haven't put a name to it. So that's one of the things. The other I would say is an unlikely one, perhaps if you knew me personally, but there's a gentleman named Paul O'Neill who was, I believe, the Secretary of the Treasury for maybe the Bush administration. He might have spanned into Clinton. I'm not sure, but he took over Alcoa in I think the late '80s, and he was a business person, and Alcoa was in the tank, and he got up in front of the shareholders, and I'm intentionally using shareholders and not the word stakeholders,
Mhm.
and he actually spoke to the stakeholders. And what he said was basically the answer to the question, what are you going to do to make us money? He said, I'm going to make Alcoa one of the greatest companies in the world again by focusing on one thing: worker safety.
Safety.
And people literally went out the back door after that and during that and told their stock folks to sell the shares in Alcoa. This guy's a nut job. What he was doing is he created a non-arguable goal around excellence. And he knew that workplace that you could measure the excellence of an organization by how happy the employees are. So I think one of the things he actually said about that workplace excellence and that particular non-arguable goal, which ends up being 0 worker days lost to illness, injury, sick days, right? That's a non-arguable goal for his company. You're never going to attain that. It doesn't have to be attainable. And but what happened is he said, look, if you work in one of our factories and there's a machine that is dangerous and you bring it to the attention of your manager and they don't fix it, then here's my phone number, right? Mm-hmm. He also told management at all levels, right now, as of now, you have an unlimited budget for worker safety. And if you don't fix something, it's your hide. I'm making you accountable for worker safety in every one of your factories. And somebody actually lost an arm in a factory in Mexico, and they had brought to the attention of the management that here was a machine that if somebody got bumped into it could be dangerous. And their solution was to paint a yellow line on the floor, which was not safety. And somebody got bumped into it while trying to get out of the way, I think, of a forklift. So, those people, the managers, got fired. And one of the things that Paul O'Neill said in that stock shareholder meeting is he said, look, if anybody wants to lose an arm, raise that arm right now. Right. And that's a nice way to think about a non-arguable goal, in which 0 unmeasured externalities is a non-arguable goal. And that's why I'm bringing up these non-arguable goals. So you can have some context. That's awesome. So I'm standing on his shoulders there. Boy, a third one. I'm drawing a blank. I started thinking about artists and people that are very creative. Peter Fripp, guitarists. There you go. Because I do think that, business is a science and an art, and it's a human venture. It's an artistic adventure to invent something, make it with your hands and then figure out how to sell it to other people.
Absolutely. Well, we're big on balance. Vision Pros Live is not a business show as much as it is a show by a founder who happens to have a business. Named Jackson. So the show itself is designed around leadership. And it's one of the reasons why I loved that you included janitors. And that I don't say that speculatively. I say that appreciatively, because so many people would not consider the janitor leader. So many people would assume that the intern doesn't have a place in leadership. But I think that you and I share the reality that as human beings, we're all leaders. And we all have the opportunity to step into leadership. A lot of people have a muzzle put on them, or are torn apart by other people who are leading poorly. And they may feel like it's not a good idea to step forward into their leadership capacity, but there are great leaders like you, like myself, and like other leaders out there who, while we all have our flaws, we want other flawed people to step forward and become their best self. So I love the story. I'm glad you reminded me of it when I the 2 times I've now talked to you, Steve. Both times, like first time was like, oh my gosh, I can only catch so much. And on this time, it's registering a little bit more on memory of like, oh, good. And so this conversation, for those of you listening in, this is the juice of executive leadership. Enjoy this. And Steve, we'll be right back. We'll come back and talk about your vision. And those of you sticking around, if you have questions for us, drop them in the comments. Even if it's after the live broadcast, of course, we'll come back to those and make sure they're addressed. All right. Welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Calame. I'm your show host. We will be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Vision Pros Live. I'm your show host, Jackson Calame, founder and CEO of First Class Business. And I get the privilege of having Steve Rice on the show today, the globally conscious leader. We are going cerebral today. I highly recommend having a dictionary on hand. I have written plenty of notes already just in our intro. And these, it's funny. We live in a world that where Steve and I both value simplicity, but we also both value complexity. And if you take the human body, for instance, my 3-year-old can draw a human body very well. It is that simple. Yet a doctor can study the human body for 40 years and still feel like they're just scratching the surface of what they know about it. So today we are going the doctor route and diving in much, much deeper into the anatomy of leadership, humanity, whether it impedes our leadership or not, and how to make sure that we bring out the best of our leadership opportunities. So with that said, before I bring Steve back on, I also want to give you guys some more resources. First one, Dave Morrow of the hardtokill.org organization. Hardtokill.org is an entity that's helping 100,000 veterans lose 2 million pounds collectively. Dave's got a great show called the Hard to Kill podcast. He's award winning. I highly recommend Googling his name and the word Afghanistan and seeing just what he was doing as an advocate for people in need. I absolutely love Dave. He's a good dude, and he's out there helping so many people. He's now including civilians in this. I'm in the workout program as well. Because of it, I have maintained my own workouts to a degree that I have not done in over 8 years, and my back feels better. And I'm super, super grateful for whatever the heck he did to my mind and my heart to get me to be consistent with workouts again. Again, he's the only one been able to do that. And I work with a lot of health people. So go, Dave. Then there's the Oportunidades de Trabajo para Latinos. That is opportunities for work for Latinos. That is our own homegrown program. And if you know of Latino leaders, or you yourself are a Latino leader and you'd like to come on our podcast, please do. Our podcast is designed to help inspire other Latinos out there who may not even be aware of LinkedIn, Canva, Upwork, and beyond. A lot of countries outside of the United States, they very much focus on technical training. And if you don't get specific technical training, the general assumption is that they then can no longer be employed in other areas of life. Yet you guys all know, and I know, that there's so many opportunities that exist for virtual assistants, and for being able to take care of people's brands and work with American companies. But what we're doing in this program is we're inspiring Latinos to jump into the game and come and realize they can put their existing social media skills to use and learn the technicalities of how to support brands. So this is my passion. This is my love. We're bridging the economic gap between North America, South America, and rest of the world. And this program has now expanded to opportunities for Filipinos and opportunities for Indians as well, led by respective leaders from those communities. So please join us on that. And if you're in need of a virtual assistant, then this is not the program for you. We see VA relationships, and I call it virtual abuse. It's time we take care of our people better, my friends. So then there's the water project. The water project is not something we're associated with, but it is something that is near and dear to my heart. When I found out about it, I fell in love with the idea that you could give to a specific community and see the actual outcome thanks to all the transparency that the water project puts into what they do. What really struck me was realizing that there are children and women and families out there who don't even have access to the basic resource that I take for granted in life. So I started to meditate and think about, well, how can we make an impact on this? And as part of the, that was part of the journey before launching this podcast. Now it's quite fun to see how many people love to get involved because we simply talk about it. We do give back to this project as well. And if you're in a position financially to give back, then of course, feel free to do so. If you're not, my hope is to inspire you to then take this to a dinner conversation, or perhaps tag a friend who might find this fascinating, might be able to help. When I see these kids celebrating water with the same enthusiasm that my kids celebrate Christmas Day, it reminds me of just how much good we can do in this world by trying to, again, spread the word and doing our part. If you have another program or cause that you'd like to see us talk about or like to see brought to our attention, don't hesitate to drop that in the comments as well. We got 8 billion people to help out there in this world. And it lights my fire to get up and do my part for that. So without further ado, Steve Rice, thank you so much for joining us on Vision Pros Live.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, my friend, absolutely. So, there's so many assumptions that I can make in terms of the depth of your team and what you guys are doing. And there's a family side of it, and there's global leadership, there's local leadership. What is the vision for those you serve, and who are you focusing on most serving on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I come from a blue collar background. I
Okay.
come out of the outdoor industry. I was a fishing guide and a mountaineering instructor, rock climbing instructor, still an active snowboarder, rock climber, all that kind of stuff. And I like working with the employees in a company. And sometimes though, in order to get access to those folks, you have to start at the top,
Of course.
with an executive and get permission to do that. So at the Globally Conscious Leader, we're actually trying to do both, because we know that we can go to an owner or a CEO and talk to them about their own culture and the accountability of their employees. They're usually worried about employee accountability, and eventually learn that they have accountabilities too that they're not aware of. But also, I'm fully aware and have experienced and taught individual people in companies where no one else knew what they were doing, but they learned Mocha and they started using that language when talking to their superiors during employee reviews, when talking to fellow coworkers, when talking to people who maybe were placed under their care, maybe they were a new manager and they had to discuss, people actually getting the job done. And you can create more visibility, more accountability, and more reliability in yourself without telling anyone else that you're doing it by implementing Mocha. And so the answer to your question is, I'm going to say everybody, which is why I included janitors, because a janitor can still make decisions that help the company. Meaning, like, we're not going to use these toxic materials to clean the floors anymore. We're going to start thinking 7 generations down, whatever those things are. Somebody who is say a graphic designer, um, you could possibly be working in what you might consider to be not the best kind of workplace. Call it toxic, semi-toxic, whatever it is. You can actually help fix that simply by being a better person. And I'm not saying it's easy to be a better person. And
Right.
I'm definitely not saying you got to be all touchy feely to be a better person. But I am saying, if you want to give yourself a framework that allows you to have conversations that allow you to be a better person and give other people the opportunity to step up, the Mocha framework is something anybody can do.
Mm. You nailed something huge too for the visionary leaders out there that are also in your shoes. They've got the opportunity to think through who is it that they want to be influencing and who is it that they need to get access to. And you reminded me of one of my absolute favorite books of all time, Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard,
Yeah.
and Sheldon Bowles. I think he often doesn't get mentioned, and that's not fair. But this book has a couple of pages in here. I've got this marked as the most important pages, 2 pages in the book. Obviously, you need the full context, but what you're talking about by mentioning sometimes you got to go through the leaders in order to get to those who you want to spend your time helping. This concept is true of almost any style of organization that exists out there, whether it's a family or it's a corporation. In the restaurant industry, we face this with our restaurant software. We could go straight to the owners, but if we took a top-down approach to implementing our software, people were pissed. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't want involved. If we
Yeah.
instead focused on the host team members and their managers and the servers and the assistant managers, if we worked our way up, we ended up creating a army of individuals who wanted our system. So when we went and talked to the owners, their people were already bought into the idea of working with us. And the people even started to demand it as we got really good at talking about that. So these pages 458 and 59, helped me have that epitome way back in the day that, okay, There's the managing partner, there's the GM, there's the assistant GM, there's the marketing, there's the IT, there's the accounting, there's the owners, there's the investors, there's the host team, there's the diner, there's the concierge, there's the event planner, there's the PR company or rep. Every single one of those people could represent an obstacle to my path, or they could represent an opportunity to help me solidify my relationship with the organization. So that's a sidebar option outside of to realize and grasp visionaries outside of the direct nature of what Steve just shared. So Steve, you I'm tempted to go down the snowboarding path. Like my desire, I want to dive down that, but we're going to dive instead right into the leadership stuff. And we're going to start with a couple of base questions. And these, to me, we may find a way to tie these back to, does our humanity impede our leadership? In fact, I think they're representations of that. So what is the worst leadership experience that you've ever had?
With me as the leader?
It can be, or, what we're really looking for is for the audience, if there's one that you experienced, as the person being led to, whatever's going to be most powerful for this audience, that's really what this is about. Even though it's a dramatic and juicy question, I really want people to benefit the most from this. So
yeah, look, I do have a couple stories, but I'll start with the one where I got into where I'm at now because I was actually working for, like I said, I was in the outdoor industry. I also was in the travel industry, and in the very youth of the internet, late 90s, I was tasked with developing an internet presence for a travel company. And it was one of my first very large successes. And it's the first time that I was able to take my technological proficiency and the artistry of how I think and put it together into something that actually was, had a business model to it and created revenue. And we actually created it was an amazing company, travelessentials.com. From that, we built a content management system, which I built it with a team that we hired at that company, and we spun that content management system off. So we're thinking of things like WordPress and that build websites, and that's how I got the technology to start a company called .com Jungle, which I still own. And I ended up taking on .com Jungle and building a company that had 12 companies. It was a modest agency with a national brand. I had a couple hundred clients, 12 employees, and at some point I had my future business partner came to me as a customer and interviewed me he'd heard about me through word of mouth, and he interviewed a whole bunch of people, and he came back to me and he said, look, I want to be the last kind of person like me that you hire. And I like, what do you mean? Like, you're hiring me? He's like, no, you're choosing the kind of people that you work with, right? And I want you to think about that, because I'm looking at you, and you seem to me to be the most capable person that I've come across between San Francisco and Portland that I've interviewed. And I've interviewed a lot of them trying to find who's going to work for me. And first of all, you're the only one who wasn't full of, can I cuss?
Yeah.
Wasn't full of shit. Meaning I didn't just say yes to everything. He's like, you're the only person who said that's not in my wheelhouse. And I value that highly. He also said, I think not only you're the most capable, but I think you're underserving your entire community with what you can do. And you're incredibly unhappy. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And as a leader, what I had done is I had started a company when I had very small children. I had a mortgage. I had other, financial concerns. I was basically a startup, and I was saying yes to every single customer who called me, who wanted a website, wanted integration with their ERPs, all that technology stuff. And I had 12 employees, and I think 9 of them were unhappy because I was unhappy. I wasn't an abusive person, right? I never have been.
Right.
But I had created a work environment where nobody was really motivated to do what they were doing. Like they were good at that, at being a designer or whatnot. And I provided a lot of training, a lot of support, but the whole atmosphere really wasn't that great, and also I was learning to identify people who potentially could be toxic or not, and I hadn't really figured that out yet. And I didn't have a tool like Mocha. And so when he showed up, this is his name's Steven Sendar. He's been a business partner of mine for 14 or 15 years now. And he basically said, like, we're going to start focusing on that. And you're going to start saying no to assholes, whether they work for you or they're your customers. And we went from a scenario where we had like 200 customers to where we had 25. But our revenue was twice as much as it was. And I had 6 employees who were really stoked to be there, you know? So
Love it.
from a leadership standpoint, I hadn't learned that saying no might be one of the most valuable things you can learn to do, because I was trying to do everything. And
Right.
and I'm not good at everything, you know? So focusing on identifying my own strengths, and it was helpful to have some feedback from somebody who's like, I think I see you for who you really are.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. I
and
think
I
a lot
made
of leaders listening can benefit a lot from. Go ahead. You had another
yeah.
thought. Let me let you finish that.
Well, I made changes to how I interact with my employees. I started, hiring people for not what they knew, but who they were. And by the time I started buying businesses, like I bought an outdoor store with Steven a while back, that's when before that, I had the other Steven Sloan of Humane
I got
Leadership.
that.
I had incorporated Mocha and Humane Leadership principles. By the time we got to buying companies, we could walk in and we could implement Mocha. And in the end, you'd have people who really didn't belong there, and not because they're not bad. They're not because they're bad people, but because maybe they'd been there for a long time. They really wanted to move on, but didn't really know how to do that. They didn't know how to say no themselves. And we gave them the opportunity to express what their motivation was for being there, maybe what their motivation is for the next thing they wanted to do, whether it was inside our company or outside.
Yep.
And if it was inside, we would schedule them opportunity to do that. And I have plenty of stories of giving people 2 hours a day to, do marketing or whatever. But it was my responsibility to give them the opportunity if they were motivated to do it. It was also my responsibility to give them clarity. But it's also their responsibility to identify what they're good at for that ability, ask for the clarity if they don't have it, give themselves the opportunity, and ask themselves if they're motivated. And if they're not motivated, my job is to help them get a job somewhere else.
Yes.
And that's got to be okay.
Of course.
And in the places that I now, am in charge of, it's okay. If somebody needs to move on, I want them to be happy. That's the number one
Correct.
thing. Not I'll find somebody else to do that work. Right.
I love that. I'm quickly becoming a fan of Mocha. Myself, we're going to be adopting that. We'll give you credit every step of the way as we use it, because it aligns very well with our process of vision, culture, leadership, and marketing. And vision, culture, and leadership, we focus on the who, and then we focus on the why. And really, it sounds like Mocha is a different way of saying that, because you got, again, motivation. And I like to define the who up front, and I define that based on values, because I don't want to plan a party with somebody I don't have a connection with.
Yeah.
I want to plan that with somebody who's actually aligned really well with the things that I stand for. And so I've also learned that maybe one of the other things I need to do, Steven Sindar, Stephen Sloan, and Stephen Rice, is just make sure that I only hire people named Jackson, or people who are willing to change their name.
Stephen.
There we go. Oh, well, in this case, no, I gotta do it for mine.
For you. Oh, you're okay.
No, it's ironic, but that is fun though. As a Jackson, and there's not many out there. Yeah, I always get a little bit more excited when I meet somebody who happens to be named Jackson. It's like there's something interesting about that. The same is true of twins. I find that twins usually run into twins more often in the world and recognize that. So
that's funny, because I have identical twins, and one of them's name is Jackson.
There we go. I already like you more. Easy play there's a tactic for all of you out there who are tactic searchers. Right. So right. Now let's talk about speaking of, does our humanity impede our leadership? I think we all know, listening in deep in our hearts, that it can, right? But it can also amplify our leadership. So Steve, you're right up on the fact that let me go back to it real quick, that leading an organization or group at any level and being a human being is difficult, but you also believe that it's not that hard. Right. And then you can teach people. That's where this inspired me to just think about humanity and impeding our leadership, or where it doesn't. We don't have a lot of time, but bless us with the time we do have. What does that mean to you? What should we be? How do we embrace our humanity in the best of ways? That's probably the question I think I want to know
Yeah.
the most.
The way I like to answer that is only do what is good for your granddaughter.
Ooh,
You know, and then by extension, if your granddaughter is that important, make sure you take care of everyone else's granddaughters.
mm,
And that's where the global piece comes in. And when we're talking about business, I get it. It is hard to do everything. Like, we want to support our local
real
community.
quick, Steve. Young bucks out there, the ones who don't have granddaughters like me, write it down. Do it anyway. You will have
Yeah.
one day. And if you don't, you can still project the reality of how important should that person be to you. Even if you're 16 years old and listening to this right now, this rule still applies to you. He's not speaking to people who are 800 years old.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is for all
remember
of
that
us.
your mom, and all of you have one, is a granddaughter,
Yeah.
right?
Keep going, man.
So, just to give some simple examples, if you've got a manufacturing facility that's next to a river, and your daughter lives downstream, or your granddaughter, you're not going to throw the, the waste from your production facility into the river, because you don't want to hurt that person. By extension, if you're hiring a company out of China to build your products or manufacture pieces of your products, you should not allow them to dump their waste into a creek that's upstream from somebody else's granddaughter. It's sort of that simple. That's why I mean, like, yeah, it's hard, but it's not that hard.
Right.
Um, you
It's a
won't
choice.
always.
Life's hard. I mean, life's hard.
Life is
So whether
hard.
you're 400 pounds or you're 4% body fat, life is still going to be hard. We just get to but we do get to choose oftentimes which hard we want.
Yep.
So I think
Yeah.
that's the reality that you're talking about. Is it can be difficult or it can be hard, but it's again that's not really part of the equation. The equation is what do we want out of this. So I love that you also said you didn't say sometimes do what is good. You didn't say strive to always. You said only do what is good. And that simplifies our choices, right? If we're willing to step into that reality, if it's like, okay, I'm only going to do what aligns with my virtue, then that eliminates the need to fuss for all of the excess options that come our way.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Well, and there's so many. I'm gonna use the word accident, but I'm not sure that that's the right word.
Mhm.
That so many accidents that have happened that have been detrimental to the human race
Mhm.
that we did. And to give you the context of what I'm thinking of, we used to use PCBs for everything in the United States, and I'm sure around the world, maybe they're still being used. We almost wiped out our entire raptor population in the United States. Bald eagles, golden eagles, everything, almost gone. And we found out that PCBs made eggshells very thin and fragile. We almost wiped out condors. That is an unmeasured externality that we weren't thinking about, right? And so I call it an accident because we didn't know that was going to happen.
What's a PCB, Steve?
Polychloral something or other.
Oh,
They were banned, I think, in the 70s. But we have a better example of that right now. Have you heard of a PFAS?
no,
Well, you've heard of a forever chemical, right?
no,
No.
no,
Okay.
man. I'm a layman. I'm a layman.
Yeah. Well, so we've all heard of Gore-Tex, I hope. Gore-Tex is a PTFE. I think it's polytetrafluoroethylene laminate. Teflon, the stuff that you are
Here's the thing, my friend. So Teflon. There you go. I heard
Teflon.
heard of one of these,
Yeah.
but one of the challenges of us for people who are intellectual is the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge, a great study by Harvard about how once we learn something, we begin to assume that it's common sense,
Mhm.
and that everybody knows it. And so if I give a water bottle to a caveman, he might stab the bottle to try to open it.
Yeah.
Versus the rest of us take for granted the twist top. Right. But we had to learn that at some point. So again, those of you who are listening in, the beautiful nature of talking to somebody like Steve is that he's got access to superpower realities that at least I myself, maybe all of you are like, Jackson, what planet have you been on? And that's okay, because I know, and for those of you who are in my position where we're like, no, I don't know anything about this. Stay confident in who you are as a human being. Stay confident that you've done things with your life that are just different than what Steve's done, and appreciate the fact that if you can dive into this knowledge and understand the value of it and why it matters to you, you might be that much better at making a purposeful impact in this world. So again, thanks for diving deep on this with me. So Teflon, I know that one.
Yeah. Well, we all know Teflon has been used. I think it was invented right after World War II. Turns out it is what makes it amazing is that it's one of the most durable materials that we've ever invented. That also means that it is impossible for nature to break it down, which is why they're now calling it a forever chemical. And it turns out that all the waterproof coats that had been invented since Gore-Tex was started being used, all the Teflon materials, they all have, it's all PFAS. And they're now in our bloodstream. They're in our lakes and our rivers. There are both scientific and anecdotal studies, people going basically out into the mountains and pulling water out of a creek that's coming off of a glacier at 11,000 feet, and there's measurable PFAS in that water. And so
great.
We're now realizing that not only is it everywhere, but we're putting more and more into every time we wash our clothes. There's every durable water repellent material that's ever been made almost has PFAS in it. And that means we wash our clothes, it goes into the sewage system, it goes into the rivers, and it goes into the ocean, and then it comes back out. Some of them are highly volatile, and they actually will evaporate into water particles, which is how they end up on mountaintops. That was a new finding of the last several years, I think.
Wow.
But we know now that those things do a lot of damage to kidneys and livers, so much so that I think it's the USDA or whoever would say this, says that there is no acceptable parts per million of several of these types of chemicals that should be allowed in anything that we have, any water, anything else. I also say that is impossible to attain. So we're going to choose, I think, 4.4 parts per trillion or something like that is what they want. And there are a lot of water systems in the United States that have 5, 6, 7, 8 parts per trillion.
This is why I love YouTube influencers like Mr. Beast and Mark Rober, right? Who combined and joined forces, and like they're cool enough and they're fun enough to put on Jimmy Kimmel Live, for instance, and talk about their project to kind of save the ocean and draw some like hype about this reality, or these things like this exist. That's where I usually learn about stuff like this, is from something that is considered kind of like young and dumb, or just like entertainment value. But if we can combine and harmonize the strengths of both of those worlds, it is people like you combining with people like them that will lead us to find these amazing creative ways to solve the bigger problem, and make sure that we are improving upon the planet that we have, not just destroying it. And
we need to solve some of the problems before we create them, is part of what I'm saying.
Yes.
There's no way I'm going to pretend that we can know everything in advance. And I know that hindsight's 2020. That's not what I'm saying here. But I am saying that we have an extractive international global business model that takes like functionality trumps like long-term effects. So Teflon's a good example. We found something, it's amazing, it's super slippery. We were like, we can use it for the thousand things.
For the visionaries listening in too, though, I think we have to apply this to their lives. And a lot of them are in combustible materials or goods and products. A lot of them are in the world of leadership. And so when we take these same principles and we apply it and say, wait a second, let's learn to go against the norm, excuse me. there's opportunities to say, you know what, how can we apply? And in our case, we're looking at how do we cultivate and inspire more love, patience, persistence, consistency, and reliability in the workforce? How do we emulate that as leaders? How do we help people feel connected to that love where we can create more balance and more appreciation for people in the workforce? How do we make sure that we create a full appreciation for family and for personal well-being within the workplace, not outside of it, but also within? And how do we also bridge economic gaps that exist out there and create win-win solutions for people? All of that can be done the same types of creative thinking and opportunities like mocha that you're
Mhm.
talking about, motivating, like figuring out the motivation, the opportunities, the clarity, and the accountability. Like that's a framework that one can apply over and over and over to different areas of life, and ultimately audit and evolve and create an even better life. So, if
Yep.
this was one last question for you, Steve, this is my favorite question of the lineup. If this was your last chance to ever speak, what powerful lesson can other visionaries learn from your experience?
Oh man. Um, Let me first give you kudos for like two of the maybe top five questions I've ever been asked. Boy, powerful visionaries. Uh, I'm going to say the zero unmeasured externalities as a non-arguable goal for everything. Because what we're saying is, uh, if you're leading and you've got a company, you need to know what effect you're having downstream. So, and externality is actually not something I invented. It's a financial economic term that came out of that started in the 1880s, but it was popularized in the 20s. And it's any effect to somebody who wasn't expecting that effect from your financial activities. And the person who invented it was thinking about banking, but we now talk about it in all business things. So if you're dumping PCBs in the river and all of a sudden the eagles are dying, that's an unintended consequence. That's an externality.
Yes.
So, but zero unmeasured externalities as a non-arguable goal, it's a very lofty idea. It doesn't say that we have to know everything, but
Right.
it says that we should be striving for excellence at all times in all things. And you can use zero unmeasured externalities to drive an art department. You can drive production. You can drive manufacturing. You can drive your company. You can drive the finance department. That the finances department's job is to uncover all those externalities. Like, just
Mhm.
what are we paying for that we don't need? What are we getting? What are we, all of that. We're actually doing this all the time. We just don't think
Right.
about it in this codified way. And if you combine zero
Mm.
unmeasured externalities with Mocha to help have those conversations about accountability, which is supported by zero unmeasured externalities, and then approach everything from a sort of an agile project management, continuous improvement, those three things, you can change the world. You can change your
Mm.
company, you can change everybody in it, and you can change the world. And it doesn't matter if you're conservative, it doesn't matter if you're liberal, it doesn't matter if you're left, right, green, white, red, orange, gray.
I love it. Those of you listening in, there's a lot of dictionary terms that for the first time I heard this, man, again, I didn't quite get it. I needed to better understand. So if codified, right, is not up your alley, agile, is not up your alley, what I hope that you catch is the intensity, the passion, the compassion that Steve speaks with. We're talking about making sure that life on earth is protected. We're talking about making sure that people have better relationships, and we will struggle to understand how to embrace our relationships and how to maximize them if we don't pay attention to our opportunity to gain more knowledge, because knowledge can be liberating if we use it appropriately. And so this idea of externalities, it's still something that is foreign to me. Again, maybe all of you guys listening are laughing at me like, Jackson, how are you not getting this? And that's okay. But if you're in my boat where these terms are um, just a little bit outside of your ability to play with it, maybe I'm used to Play-Doh and this kind of feels like playing with cement, and like trying to pull together something that is much bigger than I'm used to. My hope is that you go back just a couple seconds, click the double click to go backwards, gather those words that you don't understand, pump them into Google, ask friends or family members what they mean, because I don't think Steve is speaking hyperbolically. In fact, I can tell that he's not when he says this can change the world, and change our lives. So it's very important that we strive to do our part in understanding what that looks like. Those of you who want to know more, of course, in the action steps below the show notes, we'll have how to connect with Steve and the Globally Conscious Leader community. We'll also have below that the resources that we mentioned today. And if you have any comments, anything that you'd like to give back to this discussion or add to it, by all means, jump in. We'd be grateful to hear from you. And of course, if you want to be a guest on this show, in the top right corner, you'll see a button up there that says "Be Our Guest." You don't have to be the most cerebral person on earth to be on the show. You might be a stay-at-home parent, and you think that's the most important vision we can hear about. Personally, I couldn't agree more. At the same time, if you are the Elon Musks of the world, if you are Ken Blanchard, Sheldon Bowles, people like that, come and join us in the show too. There's plenty we can learn from each other. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. Steve, this was fantastic. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Jackson. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's get you back in the future. It'd be a lot of fun to dive even deeper. So everybody have a great day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an